Good morning, everyone. To those of you in the room, it's good to see the new normal faces. And to those of you online, great to see that there's more than 40 people around the world listening to us. So I'm delighted to welcome you to this side event. My name is Abigail Hartley. I'm the Chief of Policy for UNMAS, based in New York. But I did spend from 2008 to 2014 in Afghanistan as UNMAS Program Manager, and I am wearing my Afghan coloured scarf in solidarity with Afghanistan. So I'd like to welcome you all to this side event where we're going to talk about the opportunities and challenges for humanitarian mine action in Afghanistan and Iraq, two countries that UNMAS is significantly invested in, with thanks to the support that we receive from many donors. Our speakers today, and I will introduce them in a moment, are going to focus on mine action responses in two countries where the need, both Iraq and Afghanistan, the needs are enormous, but the operational context is very different. In Iraq, UNMAS works very, very closely with the government, building capacity with the eventual aim of handing over all mine action activities to Iraqi actors and phasing out the international presence. As you will hear, UNMAS does this through an innovative partnership grant model, which matches an international NGO with a national NGO, and then through this knowledge and skills transfer process, we are hoping and anticipating that we grow the skills in the Iraqi mine action sector. In last year, in 2021, as in previous years, Iraq was one of the countries with the most casualties due to explosive ordnance. Almost all of them due to IEDs, those are improvised explosive devices. Survey clearance, risk education, and victim assistance remain crucial to support communities that are trying to rebuild their lives in this post-conflict situation. In Afghanistan, humanitarian mine action dates back to 1989, and since that year, almost 19 million items of ERW and 750,000 anti-personnel mines have been cleared in that country. During this time and over those years, the Afghan government Directorate for Mine Action have made enormous progress in executing most aspects of mine action program management. But unfortunately, the situation at the moment is very different and very challenging. You obviously will recall the government takeover in August of 2021 disrupted the collaboration between the government of Afghanistan, international donors, and UNMAS, which has affected the coordination of the mine action sector. At the request of UN senior leadership in Afghanistan, UNMAS has stepped in, and with the support of our donors, for which we're grateful, to bridge the coordination gap and to make sure that the most important aspects of mine action program management are being met. Also in that country, similar to Iraq, there are huge numbers of casualties. In the second half of last year, for which we have data, there were 1,000 civilian casualties, again, most of them as a result of improvised explosive devices. And during that period, UNICEF, with whom UNMAS works very closely in Afghanistan and in many, many of our programs, documented and verified more than 300 child casualties. So our speakers today are going to dig deeper into the needs, the progress made, the solutions, potential solutions to remaining challenges, to give you an understanding of what remains to be done and how member states and other international partners can contribute. So before I move to the speakers, I'm really encouraging those of you participating online, please ask questions through the chat. One of my colleagues is monitoring the chat questions, and they will be relayed to me, and I'll pass them on to the speakers when we get to the Q&A. I think it would be good if we have Q&A after the Iraq. Well, actually, shall I do the Q&A? Maybe actually we'll do the Q&A at the end. So please get your notebooks and pencils out. And as you listen to, we'll talk about Iraq first. Please take note of your questions there. And then at the end, we'll combine all of the questions for our speakers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speakers, Mr. Pehr Lodhammar and Ms. Kawther Hadi. Pehr is the chief of the Mine Action Programme for UNMAS in Iraq, where he's been leading that programme for the last 5 years. And prior to that, Pehr has had roles for the UNMAS Programme Manager in DRC and also the Country Director for NPA, Norwegian People's Aid in DRC. And he's spent 7 years previously with the Geneva International Centre for Humanitarian Demining. So UNMAS is very lucky to have Pehr with so much experience leading that programme. Kawther has been a national programme officer with UNMAS since January 2020, and previously she worked for the World Food Programme and also with Norwegian Refugee Council as a camp coordinator during the 2017 Mosul emergency response. So obviously experience of working in high-stress environments. She's also worked as a team leader for the Danish Refugee Council's Child Protection Programme. So we'll be really pleased to hear from both of you. And I turn with expectation that the IT team will work their magic to give Pehr and Kawther the floor.
Right, Abigail, thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and thank you very much for this opportunity. So this is Pehr speaking from Iraq, and as Abigail said, I'm the Chief Mine Action Program for the UNMAS Iraq program. We don't have that much time today. I could talk about the Iraq program and mine action and explosive hazard management in Iraq for days. We won't do that. We'll keep it to about 20 minutes, and we'll finish with a film. I will start by introducing Kawther, who is with me today, who is program officer with UNMAS Iraq. And then after that, Khalid Ahmed, who's project manager with IHSCO, one of our long-standing NGO partners, will be presenting on their work. The label of the presentation, if we can get it on screen, is UNMAS Iraq Shifting Gears. I will start with a very brief introduction on the background to UNMAS Iraq. I'll give you an overview of some of the highlights over the last 5 years. And from there, we will move to our partnership model. And then Kawther will talk about gender in mine action in Iraq specifically. And then in the end, we'll watch this video. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And I don't know, I don't have full screen now with the slideshow, but perhaps others do. So I will just continue. So UNMAS Iraq was formally established in June 2015, and we launched operations in 2016 under UN Security Council Resolution 2470. We have received approximately $250 million from 20 different donors over the last 5 years. With a peak being 2019 with $76 million. Next slide, please. So in Iraq, we address a threat from explosive ordnance through 3 pillars of work, essentially. So one of them is what we label explosive hazard management. And that is, next slide, please. Yeah, there. And that is finding the explosive hazards, so survey, and then removing the explosive hazards. So that's one of the pillars. The second pillar is a technical support that we provide to the government of Iraq. Iraq is complex in that there are 2 national mine action authorities, the Directorate for Mine Action in federal Iraq in Baghdad, and then with the Kurdish regional government, the Iraqi Kurdistan Mine Action Agency, or ICMA for short. We provide both of them with training, we provide them with technical advice, and we have embedments within those structures to provide technical advice and support on a daily basis. The third pillar is explosive ordnance risk education, and I'll get back to that, which has proven in Iraq in particular that there are a lot of opportunities for us to be innovative. We work mainly in the retaken areas, and we've had a focus on Nineveh and Anbar. We also worked previously in Kirkuk, which are the part of liberated areas. But since a year, we also have, and this is something the government have requested for a long time, we are also delivering clearance operations in the southern governorate of Basra, where we are removing legacy contamination from the Iran-Iraq war. Next slide, please. And the next one, please. Should be one with a lot of circles. Perfect, thank you. So a few highlights, and we'll take it circle by circle, so one click for each. One of them, when we first started in Iraq 5 years ago, stabilization was a priority, and during the first 3 years,
they felt like they couldn't relocate. It's very interesting.
During the first 3 years, we surveyed and cleared 1,600 stabilization priorities in the form of bridges, schools, hospitals, water treatment plants, power plants. Next slide, please. Okay, and the next one. There we go. Yeah. No, back to mechanical. So mechanical clearance is something that has offered an opportunity. When we entered Mosul, we very soon realized that the level of debris and rubble was incredible. And under this debris and rubble, we would find explosive hazards in the form of improvised explosive devices, rockets, artillery shells, etc. So we very soon started using mechanical assets. There was a resistance towards this from the beginning. The mine action sector is very conservative and didn't want us to use mechanical assets. Now, 5 years later, all our teams have armored excavators and armored front-end loaders supporting operations. Click, please. We have had, over the last 5 years, a very strong strategic communications narrative where we have used films, we used social media, we used books, and I'll get to that. And we also published a number of op-eds in leading newspapers. Click, please. Female police training was something we started with 4 years ago. We had an explosive hazard management first responder training course that initially was delivered only for male police officers, but we very soon realized that this would also be suited for female police officers. And it's a 5-day training course where we train local police officers to be able to identify explosive hazards, report them, and warn their own communities. Since 2017, we've trained hundreds of female police officers to become first responders. Next click, please. I was in Iraq the first time in 1999, so 23 years ago. At that point in time, it was absolutely impossible to have female participation in the sector, although we tried. I was adamant, and together with me, adamant that we would have female participation and female operators with our teams in Iraq. Now, again, 5 years later, we have all our teams, all our clearance teams, from the level of operator and up to team leader, we have females operating with us. The first team that where we had a mixed team was in Sinjar. We had a Yazidi team with Yazidi men and women working side by side already in 2018. Next slide, please. Building on this and bringing women to the mine action sector in Iraq, we learned a lot of interesting lessons. And building on this, we decided to create a drama. We used a production company and we recorded 6 episodes of a drama called Safe Home. It's about a female Iraqi, well-educated young woman who is becoming a team leader with a clearance NGO. And it's about her daily challenges and how she's addressing them with her colleagues and her family. each episode ending with a cliffhanger. It's available on Facebook under Safe Home. It had hundreds of thousands of viewers and over 30,000 likes so far. Next slide, please. As part of our strategic communications narrative, we published a book just recently, My Sinjar Reflections. It has 26 stories, poems, diary notes, and stories from our Yazidi team members who operated in Sinjar. It's been distributed within the UN and the diplomatic community here in Iraq, and it's published in English, Kurdish, and in Arabic. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in the introduction, we mobilized over the last 5 years almost 250 million for our operations, and this amount is what has gone through UNMAS to the 3 pillars of work that I described. Next slide, please. 4 years ago, in supporting stabilization, it was identified that under the iron bridge that had collapsed in Fallujah, there were explosive hazards. And we brought in underwater capacity from Montenegro for 10 days, diving on the site and removing explosive ordnance underwater. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because this is the first time UNMAS done this, and it's also the only time done this in Iraq. But this bridge was one of the stabilization priorities, one of 1,600 stabilization priorities we surveyed and cleared, and it's now carrying thousands of trucks and cars across the river that is separating Fallujah. Next slide, please. I did mention explosive ordnance risk education. It's really an area in Iraq where we have been able to be innovative. We've had a number of films broadcasted on TV and the internet, one for youth, one for young children, and one for returnees. We have used different types of social media, including Facebook. We also used virtual reality goggles. During the COVID outbreak, we were using loudspeaker systems, and it's also delivered, of course, in traditional face-to-face manner to returnees and affected communities, as well as school children. Next slide, please. As an example of innovation, we have delivered drone training for Iraqi police and the Ministry of Interior. We trained them on how to use drones to do reconnaissance of areas suspected of containing explosive hazards. It was a 1-week training course that we've run several times, and after that we have also handed over the equipment to Iraqi police for them to continue to use. Next slide, please. Following stabilization, we entered into a phase with durable solutions, which is all about durable returns, and for the remaining 1 million of displaced Iraqis to return to their places of origin in a way that is safe and dignified. In doing this, we identified last year that there was a need for dedicated residential area clearance teams. So now we have 2 of these teams operating in Nineveh. They are very much focused on ensuring that the residential areas, houses, etc., are cleared before people can return. Next slide, please. Technical support to the 2 national mine action authorities. We work very, very closely with the 2 mine action authorities, the one in Erbil and the one here in Baghdad, through embedments, training courses, as well as technical advice on different levels. And I would like to take this opportunity also to 2 national mine action authorities for the long-standing and excellent collaboration we have with the 2. Next slide, please. The partnership model is also a highlight, something we started almost 2 years ago, and talk more in detail about that shortly. Next slide. As I said in the beginning, the government of Iraq asked us ever since we first arrived in Iraq that we also start clearance of legacy contamination in southern Iraq. And since a year, through funding from the European Union, we have been carrying out clearance of legacy contamination, anti-personnel mines and anti-vehicle mines in the area of Shatt al-Arab, bordering to Iran. This is a project that will continue under, amongst others, Swedish funding for the coming year. And we will continue to the next slide, please. Click forward, please. Forward. So what I next wanted to mention is the partnership model and capacity enhancement, which we are doing through grants. So initially, when we first commenced operations in Iraq, we carried out operations using international commercial contractors working in tandem with national commercial contractors. Based on requests from the diplomatic community as well as UN leadership and the Iraqi government, we 2 years ago started implementing something we call the partnership model. The partnership model is basically, we issue grants for international NGOs who will then team up and partner with national NGOs and build the capacity over a period of 2 to 3 years of the national NGO, aiming towards the national NGO becoming self-sustained, autonomous, nationalized, and localized after that period of time, to a degree where lies funding. Next slide, please. No, you missed one now. But you can stop there and I will talk you through the other 2 slides and Kawther can take it from there. So the partnership model basically builds the capacity of the national NGO within 8 different areas: management, programmatic, operational, support, quality management, leadership, risk management, and resource mobilization. So basically on all levels, from the level of operator and the hands-on task of removing explosive hazards from the ground and up to senior management and resource mobilization. The partnership model is expected, and we know already that it is indeed much cheaper than the commercial model. But as these NGOs becomes fully nationalized, we also expect that it will become increasingly less costly, and it represents a clear pathway for UNMAS to exit while also leaving a legacy of professional, high quality, effective, autonomous, and efficient national. And with that, I will leave the floor to Kawther before I come back to you again in a few minutes. So Kawther, please.
Do we have a technical hitch here? Does Kawther need to unmute?
Do you hear me?
So, Abigail, okay, now we can hear you.
I heard someone. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kawther.
Sorry.
No problem. No problem.
I will repeat again in case I missed the first introduction. Can we see the slides, please? Yes, gender mainstreaming. UNMAS Iraq continues promoting women participation in peace and security, encouraging the recruitment of female deminers for ex-clearance operations. Gender mainstreaming and women empowerment in national mine action authorities and other government of Iraq entities. UNMAS Iraq internal processes and planning, including recruitment, country strategy development, and donor proposals mainstreamed for gender. Gender and diversity toolkit. Please press the circle. UNMAS Iraq developed a unique gender toolkit with an aim to provide active support to our implementing partners to guide them through the process of how to think, plan, design, implement, and monitor the integration of gender and diversity consideration in all areas of mine action activities. This toolkit provides numerous resources, documents, training materials, videos, checklists, and how to undertake this work. And in order to ensure the best outcome from the gender and diversity toolkit delivery, a monitoring component is in the form of implementation plan that includes activities, next step, implementation, and reporting schedule. It is worth mentioning that the implementation of the gender and diversity toolkit is under the responsibility of the gender focal points and head of project. Next, please. Socioeconomic empowerment of women through mine action. In its measurement of the socioeconomic status of women in mine action and their potential empowerment, UNMAS Iraq conducted a baseline study of a socioeconomic empowerment of women through mine action in Nainawa Governorate. The aim of the study was to find out the impact of women and their empowerment in mine action. This baseline study examines source data from the UNMAS-supported mixed-sex explosive hazard management teams and explosive ordnance risk education teams in Nainawa Governorate in Iraq. UNMAS Iraq has measured the economic, social, and dynamic impact and found out that 50% of female became majority financial contributor to household, where the top spending charges are in supporting family with clothes, food, and other needs. This led to increased decision-making on a daily and high-value items. While the initial reaction of supportive of mixed-sex teams was 34%, in a later reaction, 66% expressed their acceptance for mixed-sex teams. 68% of the families see significant increase in women's empowerment. As a dynamic change, means support of women in mine action 100% in risk education and 69% in clearance. Also notice that 93% of women believe that women can work at the highest explosive ordnance disposal certification level. This resulted in a high confidence in self, career, and support to family. Next, please. For training and mixed gender team, UNMAS Iraq provides training for the police female from Ministry of Interior to be trained as explosive ordnance first responders. Since its beginning in 2016, UNMAS Iraq has provided training to 376 female and 1,772 male. Also recently, UNMAS Iraq provided a female EOD level 1 and 2 training to 16 participants from UNMAS Iraq and from national authorities participants and from national IBs. UNMAS Iraq coordinated and established the first mixed gender team of deminers in Iraq 2 years ago. The team was based in Sinjar in Nainawa Governorate. Currently, UNMAS has mixed gender teams in all its locations. Thank you for your listening, and over to you, Pehr, again.
Thank you very much, Kawther. I hope we won't have any technical glitches, but what we will do now is that for the next few minutes, we will watch a video about what we call a safe place. So in Mosul, UNMAS, together with the Halo Trust and the national NGO Al-Ghad, identified an area suitable for a park. So this area was cleared from explosive hazard, it was fenced off, and then constructed as a park with a playing area, areas for people to come together and meet, as well as internet, so that people can work, they can study, all very good for the social fabric of the community and a safe place for people to come together and socialize. We had the opening of this park in November last year, and hopefully it's the first of several that we will be constructing. So we'll watch the video, and then after that, we'll leave the floor to IHSCO for their presentation. Thank you.
Today we've had the opening of a safe space and a park that has been constructed and built by the Halo Trust together with Al-Ghad organization here in Mosul. This space will provide a safe space for deliverance of life-saving messages, for people to come together, and where they will be unexposed to explosive hazards. It's an interesting project in that it's the first time we're doing something like this, and I'm hopeful that in the future we'll be able to do and construct more parks like this one, where people can come together and meet in a safe manner.
We are one of UNMAS's implementing partners, and we've worked with them and also with a local partner to develop this safe space in Mosul where I am today. I'm here today with the UNMAS team because we are formally opening the park. The park is in the middle of Mosul Old City, which experienced some of the most intensive fighting when the city was liberated from ISIS. And what we've done is we've worked with the community to identify an at-risk group who we believe to be adolescents and create a risk mitigation project, we've called it. And this intervention hopefully will reduce the risk of explosive hazard accidents in Mosul Old City by giving teenagers a safe space to hang out and play.
هاي المنطقة كانت يعني شبه ممسوحة معدومة، وخلال يعني لقائنا بالمنظمة انطيناهم فكرة عن هذا المتنزه انه يسووا إعادة ترميم لهذا المتنزه، يجيبون يعني مرجوحات للأطفال، وكما تشاهدون هذا الخراب اللي حاصل بهذا المنطقة. هذا المتنزه يخدم كثير عوائل وبالأخص يخدم الطلاب. يعني هسه نحن ما عندنا مكان الطالب يروح يدرس به، ومتوفر له الانترنت. الانترنت متوفر للطالب يعني انه يقعد يسترخي يقدر يدرس.
Thank you very much to Pehr and Kawther for that. It was just so interesting to hear. You can see there's obviously great innovation, introducing mechanical assets. We heard about drones, police training. I was pleased to hear female participation, youth, young children, films, books. Pehr and colleagues, you've really taken innovation to another level in Iraq. And also to Kawther, thank you for talking us through the the impact of female participation. I thought it was really interesting. We hear all the time, oh, we employed this many women and this many men. But for you guys to go a little bit further and really study what difference did that make for female agency and their decision making at home is really, really interesting and good to hear. And thank you for that video, which uplifts us, no doubt. So I'm really pleased now to introduce Mr. Khalid Ahmed. Salam alaikum, Khalid. He is with the Health and Social Care Organization in Iraq, IHSCO. He's been a project manager for IHSCO since 2017, previously working as a supervisor in the mine risk education program of IHSCO. He's lots of experience across human resources, management, security, and coordination. And previously, he's worked with USAID and Humanity and Inclusion, previously known as Handicap International. And Khalid, we're really, really pleased to give you the floor. Remember to unmute. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I am so delighted to be with you in this panel discussion. I will try to be summarized for the important activities. I just want to see that I don't see the presentation in my screen. I have a problem maybe with. So I will
we
talk
can
and
see
you
it.
can show the presentation.
Khalid, we can
Good.
see it. So
That's
you continue.
Okay. IHSCO, it's meaning Iraqi Health and Social Care Organization. It's an independent organization, not affiliated with any government, parties, politicals, or religions authorities. Independent in its work. IHSCO worked in URE field in cooperation with DMA and UNMAS. IHSCO has considered these different nature of communities and beneficiaries, background to structure the project teams to be mixed gender, composed of one male and one female headed team leader to reach both gender beneficiaries. IHSCO have a training department which help a lot of and developing the IHSCO staff performance and materials. IHSCO have a quality assurance team described and all. Hello?
Yeah, hello, Khalid. We lost you for a moment, but we can hear you again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please
Okay,
continue. Good. You're doing well.
IHSCO have a quality assurance team, all activity including field phase or other verifications. It held designations point to and need to improve these points and develop of performance. UNMAS has visited IHSCO more than 15 times and all were successful and with high degree. Thanks for UNMAS. IHSCO used printed materials with URE message carry in UNMAS and DMA logos and donors logos sometimes, including rural banners used during all IHSCO's training courses. These materials addressing children and adults have a simple and short message of do not touch, do not approach, and inform civil defense and DMA hotlines with a different photo of IED, dangerous area, and risk takes behavior. IHSCO posts URE photos, audios, and videos materials on its social medias. IHSCO produced with contain UNMAS and DMA logos. IHSCO team collect data through the village profile assessment mechanism and the social economic impact survey in the community liaison component of the project. IHSCO also have also using the MISMA forms during their community liaison activities. The successful community liaison activity have results in data collection, a lot of MISMA forms about dangerous area and victims and accidents. I would like to clarify how IHSCO's work and their activity. First of each project, IHSCO URE team are conducting village profile assessment and social economic survey to help understanding the impact of EO and support the prioritization of needs for EORE activities as well as inform future projects. Also, the teams are conducting baseline CAP surveys and disc review to identify the knowledge gaps, belief and behavior patterns that may identify needs, problem and barriers to help plan and implement intervention. I will go through the details of the activities. The first one is capacity building, because this will give us the sustainability. One of the main components of the project that contributes of the migrate of EO risk and maintains and minimize the EO impact on the people in Nainawa and the capacity building of Nainawa Director of Education. It is a target institution directly contact with the community and can reach for all houses. The Ministry of Education and Nainawa Education Department. The capacity building of teachers to convey URE messages through their network is a key sustainable for EORE messages in affected communities, and all enhances separating the EORE network for reaching more direct and indirect beneficiaries. The school will play a key role in sustainability when they have trained people that can be resecureful for their communities by involving the Ministry of Education in planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation at governorate level. Ministry of Education will have a well-trained capacity and their resources to continue implementing EORE. IHSCO has been working closely with the Ministry of Education, Nainawa Department, and Nainawa Community, Police Community, and UNMAS, DMA, and many other ministries like Ministry of Health, Ministry of Electricity, Ministry of Agriculture, and also municipality, Nainawa Municipality and Kirkuk Municipality. IHSCO was completing of training 28 master trainers in Nainawa Education Department. They will train of 1,800 teachers. They will be trained by the master trainers like that got the training by IHSCO. It's a great move towards sustainable EORE in the government and Nainawa government and the Ministry of Education. And also completing of 10 employees and delegated from the community police. This is in Nainawa government. Most of them from all villages and cities in the district of Mosul and Hamdaniya, Tal Afar, Tel Kaif. We work with Ministry of Health with the IHSCO trained dozens of vaccines field moving teams that they can move to the between the roads and the villages, cities, and they use our printing and they deliver EORE messages to the people at their home. We work also with the Ministry of Agriculture, IHSCO trained dozens of field roving teams. These employees from Ministry of Agriculture visit the farmers and their farms. So they themselves need these EORE messages and how to deliver to the people that we cannot reach them or they are far. Ministry of Agriculture also, IHSCO trained addition of field roving teams. They traveling even in the night when the electricity cut or the silk cut or the wire cut, and they go and abandon and maybe destroyed areas. And also at the same time, they deliver EORE messages to the beneficiaries. And also, IHSCO was trained hundreds of municipality workers. They work in the field. We had many accidents before, and we addressed them to educate. Also, IHSCO trained hundreds of cash for workers in Nainawa government. This will be installation risk education within these institutions, as well as the support of the sustain the community-based EORE delivery and knowledge within local communities. A lot of activity and successes and case studies were full and evidence of EORE sustainability in the educational system. It reflects the significance of capacity building and impact on changing behavior, while highlights success in sustaining EORE by using different methods that beneficiaries can benefit from. IHSCO noticed and have a formation data by survey that the decreasing in casualties, accidents, in addition to increase the people report about the location of the OD or remnants of war. And this is change behavior. Before, the people in Nainawa government afraid to call or report or contact the military or self-defense forces. Now we touched these that the people contact many times, and also the self-defense and the authority forces and go immediately EOD location or bobby traps or remnants of war exactly, and cleaning and remove it immediately. It's a good and a great results and change behavior. And also IHSCO work in direct and indirect session, and this was before COVID-19. IHSCO works in direct sessions to deliver messages. After that, we IHSCO follow up the DMA instructions and the World Health Organizations and UNMAS instructions, and to work indirect with the beneficiaries. And we had many different types. For example, we produced 33 till now. We produced 33 videos, and also we have many different messages, SMS, and also we work in door-to-door, direct session, door-to-door. This is after COVID-19. And now we are working directly sessions to the beneficiaries. And also we have a sand table market. It's an official and unofficial marks games, bobby traps. 2 places for it is to show the beneficiaries markets, real market, but not approach on them exactly. You can see it in the presentation. There is a photo for this sand table market. This a new idea is to deliver EORE messages to the beneficiaries. It's more interactive also. Roadshow. IHSCO use fixed and mobile billboards. We use many different type to show the billboards and mobile and it's mobile with the gas cylinder trucks with the even electricity truck use the billboards, IHSCO billboards. IHSCO use screens in public space, scout camp, NATO education, health center, and IDPs camps. And also we have one in Dara organization. They have a health center, and there's a lot of people come and visit them, and they can show the AORE messages and also any other health messages that they would like to show it in the screens. IHSCO have and also used as SMS by the three sales that we have it, Korek, Asia, and Zain, to deliver messages by mobile. From our data, from the community liaison result data, we noticed that the people need some help by distributing of bottles, waters. We can see we put big and small stickers on these bottles and distribute it to the people who need it. And the same time they can use it, and the other time that they can see the EORE messages in these stickers. And also we use a booklet instead of leaflets for the children, and this booklet will be stay with the student for a long time, maybe for 1 year to use it. So every day he can see these messages, and with both two sides, different messages in it. Also, we noticed that the people through these the last month, this was too cold, and the people cannot. Some students also cannot come to the schools, and we work with the schools managers and Mukhtar in some areas, and they ask us to provide them with a blanket and socks. And these we use it with them. A big and small stickers to deliver a message, and they was very thankful. And this is very important that we can cooperate between the community and with the Amari messages. And also, IHSCO was to protect a new type of deliver the EORE messages by an interactive direct session. This was a very, very, very delight for the student and also for the teachers. We have a game that the teachers work in a snake and ladle game by them. Hello.
Hello, Khalid. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
I'm just wondering if you are you coming towards the end? I'm just a little bit conscious of time. If you would like to be able to summarize, that would be great.
Okay. And also, IHSCO, the first area application, EORE application in Iraq, it works in all smartphones and tables operated by Android and iOS. The application is user-friendly and has interactive tools, games, drawing, videos, photos, etc., as well as EORE messages and linked to all IHSCO social media. It covered all gender and age groups. IHSCO team started using it during these sessions and direct people download this application and to use it. It's free to access through Play Store, Apple Store. It's easy to use it also.
Hello, Khalid. Sorry, I think we just lost you for a moment.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to say, finally, I will finish.
Thank you.
Finally, the success of this long-standing partnership with UNMAS really resulted in shifting to a new model of partnership between IHSCO as national NGOs and DCA as international NGOs which works on building IHSCO clearance capacity. This experience is really working well as IHSCO have obtained accreditation and have 4 clearance teams operating in Nainawa. Further details can be discussed during the QA sessions. Questions and answer sessions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and sorry for the delay. It's 5 years of working, it's too much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Khalid. And it was really interesting to hear what you were saying. I heard a lot of before and after. So improved reporting, reduction in accidents. So I think you should be really encouraged that you create a difference. When you start working on something, the situation is different afterwards, and that is really encouraging. And also to see just how many different ways of delivering risk education IHSCO has generated and piloted and is implementing. So really great kudos to you and all of your colleagues on what an amazing job you are doing and really what a difference you're making. It was really great to hear, and I'm sure people will take away encouragement of seeing an Iraqi organization really having such an impact. So well done to you and your colleagues. Thank you very much. And this concludes the part about Iraq. But I do hope, as we mentioned before, that you'll take note of any questions that you might have, and we'll be pleased to answer those. So now we move to Afghanistan. And we'll hear, first of all, from 2 UNMAS colleagues, and then we will turn to the Halo Trust, a long partner of UNMAS and deliverer of mine action in Afghanistan. So first, we'll hear from Paul Heslop, and then from Lyuba Guerassimova. So Paul Heslop joined the Afghan team as the program manager there in January of 2021. And before that, Paul was the chief of the program section in UNMAS headquarters since 2011. Paul has 27 years of experience in mine action, where, of course, he has learned and gained skills in technical programmatic management and has delivered projects in over 25 manufactured countries. Lyuba joined Afghanistan in August 2020, and she's worked previously for UNMAS in Libya and Iraq. In Afghanistan, she covers programmatic and operational areas of work, including risk education and information management. And outside of mine action, she's worked in security, crisis response, elections, refugee and migration support with various different NGOs and also the European Union and NATO. So we're very pleased to have Paul and Lyuba to talk to us. And I'll turn first of all to Paul. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Abigail. And I realise we're running slightly over time, so I'll just trim things back a little bit. If you could put the presentation up, please. I think just to touch on the introduction that Abigail gave before, to put it in context, 10 years ago, things were going very, very well, and the number of casualties from explosive devices in Afghanistan was under 200 a year. The last year of data, we're looking at probably around 2,000, and obviously data is not that accurate in Afghanistan at the moment, so it's probably more than that. So we're seeing the trends going in the wrong way, and again, 2/3 of those casualties are coming from mines of an improvised nature. So things that have been laid in the last 5 years, things that were laid against coalition forces, and are having a direct impact on civilians. And some of the pictures I'm using I've actually stolen from Halo, and they show just how close these devices are to schools and inside communities. Next slide, please. So what we're just going to quickly cover is what are the needs at the moment, some of our proposed solutions, and then, as always, the requirement for people to get their checkbooks out. Next slide, please. So Afghanistan at the moment is definitely one of the most complex situations in the world. There is different types of contamination that stretch back across the past 40 years. There is still some of the legacy contamination from the Russian occupation during the 80s, some contamination from the civil war in the 90s, and then a lot of the contamination that's causing problems today and certainly causing casualties is since 2001. And there is a different technical need and technical solution for each of those problems. And there is obviously very different political dimensions as well to some of that contamination. And I think one of the things that has perhaps become apparent to me in the last 18 months and certainly in the last 6 weeks with what's happening in Ukraine is what are the obligations that member states are under that are outside of the Ottawa Treaty? You know, the Ottawa Treaty has been something that Afghanistan has very much used as sort of perhaps the backbone of the design of the program for the last 20, 25 years. But when you look at the contamination that's on the ground now in terms of airdrop munitions that came from the coalition, ground-to-ground munitions that were fired by both sides, and then improvised mines and IEDs that have been used in sort of an asymmetric environment. The Ottawa Treaty probably doesn't really cover it in the way that we need, but when you look at some of the obligations that member states have got under CCW Article 5, I think there is. And interestingly, being in a conference in Moscow last year where both Moscow and China were saying that the CCW is something that we should be looking at, I think now with what's going on in Ukraine and the situation we are in Afghanistan, that is another tool, another treaty mechanism perhaps that we haven't looked at in a way that we could to get some traction on this. Certainly thinking about a third of the land that is registered as contaminated. Now, I'm not saying a third of the problem, but a third of the land is from range complexes that were being used by the coalition forces. Now, the level of contamination on that land and the number of casualties is not as high as from improvised mines, but we're still looking at over 200 casualties from that type of contamination in the last 5 years. Similar to Gaza, we know of at least 200 airdrop bombs that, big bombs, 250 pounds, 500 pound, 1,000 pound bombs that, were definitely delivered by coalition aircraft, and they present a problem and they need to be dealt with, and that's a different technical solution. We've got ground-to-surface missiles, ground-to-ground missiles and air-to-ground missiles that also require a complex solution. So I think we're in a really interesting situation in Afghanistan in terms of needing to be innovative, needing to look at different mechanisms to get that hook, looking at different treaties that are in place, and also different funding sources. When you look at what was spent in terms of billions or trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, the amounts that we're asking for now is a tiny fraction of those amounts. And to be honest, if Toyota produced cars that failed at the rate that bombs and munitions did, or GE was making refrigerators that 1 in 10 failed to work, they wouldn't have a very good share price, and there would be a lot of warranty claims. So it still surprises, withstanding the argument of why weapon systems are used, when they're used, and how they're used, the fact that manufacturers consistently make things that don't work as advertised, charge an awful lot for it, and then have no responsibility to clean up the mess they make is an issue that I think is something that should be looked at. And actually the CCW does cover it to a degree. So I think there are interesting times ahead for that. And certainly, I saw a figure of 60, 70 billion for the reconstruction of Ukraine already. These are going to be interesting things. The other real problem is Afghanistan. Sanctions are hitting it hard. There is no liquidity. There is food in the markets, but nobody has any cash to buy it with. The banks, there are queues by 8 o'clock in the morning, 900 meters long to get into the bank to try and withdraw a tiny amount of cash. So there are products, but there's no liquidity. Nearly 1 million Afghans have been made redundant since September. That's 1 million families that don't have an income anymore. 97% of the population is going to be in poverty by the end of the year. 50% of the population today is already food insecure. Somebody said something the other day, which is, we've gone from a point of helping the needy, and we're now taking from the hungry to save the starving. The situation is absolutely dire. And, the fact that we've gone from 5,000 Afghan deminers to 3,000 deminers since September is a really move in the wrong direction, when actually we have the equipment in country to go to 10, 15,000 very, very quickly. And if you think 15,000 Afghans of fighting age supporting 15,000 families, and those salaries being used again and again in the communities, providing liquidity, providing the opportunities to claw themselves out of this dire situation they're in. I think there's so many aspects of what Mine Action is doing, more than just removing the mines and removing the explosive hazard. There is an awful lot of contamination, and I know if you want, ultimately the transition of power in August was a lot less bloody than expected. But the previous 2 years was pretty intense fighting, and there is a lot of contamination in areas around Kandahar, Helmand, and other places where there was a lot of fighting. And that just didn't disappear. Nobody waved a wand in August and all the explosive hazard disappeared. And we're constantly getting reports coming in now of how the presence of mines, the perceived presence of improvised mines, of explosive hazard, is stopping other aid from being delivered, stopping returns, stopping IDPs coming back, stopping reconstruction, stopping key infrastructure, and particularly stopping emergency assistance in terms of food distributions through people like FAO and WFP. And then, of course, the government itself, or the de facto authorities, they are in a very difficult position. Whatever the weather all about who should or shouldn't be in power, they are now massively under sanctions. They have no income. They don't have the experience of dealing with a lot of these situations, and it's making a bad situation much worse. And this is, again, hopefully somewhere where the UN can perhaps add some value and be doing it. I mean, I think one of the biggest achievements of the UN so far has been able to find a way to inject cash into the banking system for UN projects and our implementing partners that allows dollars to be withdrawn by individuals so that they can use it. And that is one of the most impressive things I've seen in my time in the UN, is their response to trying to create some liquidity. But even if you put it into context, the UN taking in $50 million a month is not going to solve a problem of a country with 45 million people. Next slide, please. So just some very quick images here, and actually, as Callum's with us, I don't want to steal his thunder, but just these are pictures from Halo. You can see this is down in Helmand or Kandahar, looking for pressure plate or victim-operated IEDs, and how close they are to buildings and residential areas. Next slide. Again, I believe that's a school. Next slide. Just on the outskirts of a town, right in the middle of a road. Next slide. The type of components that are being used in this. These are relatively simple devices to create, but they are causing an awful lot of problems and an awful lot of casualties. And again, when you've got a mix of explosives that's 15 to 25 kilos, traditionally you stand on an anti-personnel mine, a PMN or a PFM1 or something like that, you lose a leg. Stand on one of these, the individual who triggers it is dead, and people around. So you're getting multiple casualties per bang as well, which is another problem for us to worry about. Next slide, please. So the solutions that we're looking at for this is first of all to understand what is the problem. We've got a lot of the country has been inaccessible for 20 years. Certainly 25% of the country we can get to today that we couldn't 6 months ago. So we want to do a survey. We want to build up a picture of what the problem is. We want to see how that ties into inhibiting other aid and inhibiting emergency response, inhibiting the humanitarian sector, looking at how that will help the protection cluster, etc. To do this, we want, so good survey, build up a picture very quickly using really effective information management tools, going to quick response teams to remove a problem as soon as it's identified, looking at getting large-scale clearance on the ground and the economic benefits of that, as well as clearing hazard. Risk education to try and bring those casualties down as quickly as possible. Change behaviour, as we've seen in the previous presentations from Iraq, very similar to that. And then also working, because we're going to be going into areas that people haven't been for 15, 20, 25 years, working with humanitarian partners so that they can go into these areas, understand what the threat is, and be able to work around that threat or avoid that threat and not become victims or casualties themselves. Next slide. So as I say, 25% of the country was inaccessible. There haven't been large-scale clearance activity, large-scale survey in the last 5 years. And as I also mentioned, a lot of the work that's been done in Afghanistan for the last 20 years has been very much around the Ottawa Treaty, which is still relevant, but we're now really back into a true humanitarian emergency mine action scenario, probably for the next year to 3 years. And treaty compliance is still something we should factor in, but with the government not being recognised and with other problems on the ground, I don't think it's the biggest driver at the moment. We need to be going back to the humanitarian lens and focusing on how that can work. There is a lot of extraneous data in the database. That needs to be cancelled. We need to identify what the new hazard is and define that and log it and in a sense price it. There's about 40,000 gazetted communities. We think there's another 40,000 plus out there. So identifying what, communities that are not on the books and how they can be helped. Coming back with safe access so that we can get assistance into those. Figure out what are the priorities so that we get the maximum impact and the maximum enabling. Moving the quick response teams provided by partners like Halo, FSD, DDG, OMAR. We want to ensure there's a gender component. We're working with the authorities to ensure that we use the Mahram system and that there are, that the female perspective in every community we go onto, every task we do is captured in some way. And then trying to make sure that we're using information management tools as possible. Can somebody just mute them? Could everybody mute if you're not already, please? Next slide. Okay, I'm going to hand you across to Lyuba, who's going to take us through the information management and some of the other tools we're using. Over to you, Lyuba.
Thanks very much, Paul. So we have also been scaling up our information management response, which has included feeding in a lot of data into our online system. So we have dashboards on one hand where we have contamination, the various team and project locations. Mine action funding, we also have some additional dashboards like casualties, as well as risk education activities, and we are working on developing more. We also have web applications, which are the more interactive version of these dashboards, including the ability to search for a location and check the contamination. The more you zoom into a dashboard or into a web app, the more information you can see of the various hazards. You can also filter according to the information that you need. We are also mapping various assessments, including the whole Afghanistan assessment that REACH has been conducting, where we look at responses to explosive ordnance related questions. We also have something that's my favorite. It's a web application that is showcasing the mining impact over the years, where we have satellite imagery from 2014 and 2021. And this is mapped against the cleared hazards, the polygons that you can see in the screenshot on the slide. And you have this web app covering the whole country, so you can zoom into every location and see what sort of development has happened since the hazard has been cleared. And I believe the presentation will be shared after that, and you can access all these dashboards and applications through the link that's on the slide on the left side with credentials here. And we are aiming to also include in these dashboards and applications the priorities of our partners. For example, we have an internal operational dashboard which includes priorities of other organizations such as UNHCR, which helps us really identify priority locations for our activities. Next slide, please. Next slide, see if I can see. I don't see it. Anyways, I'll run through it. So we are, our response includes two main aspects versus to remove the problem. And here we have the deployment of quick response teams for EOD and call outs. We receive some hotline calls through the Mine Action hotline, as well as through the partner hotline, that's IDP AWAS hotline that is run by the UN and receives calls for all sorts of issues. We also have calls made directly to our implementing partners. We also have a large-scale land release to enable some wider projects and to enable wider livelihoods for Afghans. We are also really scaling up the response in terms of capacity enhancement to tackle the improvised explosive devices threat. That's through training, mentoring, and providing detectors, which are quite hard to import. And the mine action sector in Afghanistan really is lacking this sort of equipment, which is quite crucial for the clearance of IDs. We are currently conducting the mentoring phase of our project together with Halo Trust. And this includes essentially deploying on actual hazards the teams that we have already trained. Next slide, please. In terms of mitigating the risk, that's the various forms of risk education that we have. The first one is face-to-face risk education, where we tackle returnees and IEPs, as well as providing training to children's educators in priority provinces where we have seen very high child casualty rates. Children are disproportionately affected by the conflict in Afghanistan, so we try to create a project that aims to tackle this. We also have a collaboration with BBC Media Action, where they are delivering a mass media campaign, which includes radio and TV PSAs, as well as a radio magazine program, which will be highly interactive, including debates, short dramas, and testimonies and stories, and is going to enable the audience to interact live through SMS and calls into the radio station. We are also conducting a radio and video broadcasting of some material we produced last year, including animated videos for children for the various age groups, as well as a radio drama that we produced. We are also collaborating with UNICEF and Save the Children to enhance the delivery of risk education to children. That includes collaboration in the use of speaking and comic books, with audiobooks or speaking books being very well received so far, because in some areas in Afghanistan, literacy rates are still quite low, but this is quite an effective method of delivering risk education. We are also collaborating in terms of face-to-face risk education in child-friendly spaces and community-based education sites. And Paul, back to you for coordination. Next slide.
Okay, next slide, please. So I think one of the challenges that we now face is, because the lack of recognition of the de facto authorities and the red lines that have been put in place by the donors, and also some of the red lines that are in place there, we are now, I think as a sector and certainly as UNMAS, finding ourselves to be jamming the sandwich. We've proposed a humanitarian mine action coordination centre. That was acceptable to both parties, but it's fallen over on some minor issues, but quite key problems. I'm hoping that we will resolve that in the next couple of weeks. But I think what we need to be doing in terms of coordination, it is not going to be well resourced for the next 18 months, 2 years. And I'm looking to work with our implementing partners to ensure that they have really good internal quality management systems, that we can be sure that whether we're giving a grant or a contract to them or it's being funded bilaterally, that their processes in place are sufficiently robust that they don't need an external QA with a clipboard to visit them every other week. This is something that we should be looking at and ensuring that the internal quality control of our partner organisations is robust enough to ensure that the delivery is to the standard we expect. What I think is going to be very key in terms of coordination is maintaining a national database, and that IMSMA is intact and has been maintained. It is under the control of DMAC. We do have a backup of that, and we've migrated it into our global information management tool. Implementing partners also have their own databases, and I think what we do need to make sure is that we're absolutely maintain a robust integration of information through the various databases with data dumps and exports, and making sure that knowledge is power, but it's also key. So really working on making sure that that's in place, and we have two very good IM specialists who are supporting us remotely, and we've got good buy-in from the sector to do this. We also Afghanistan, as I said, has been very focused on treaty compliance for the last 20 years, and there is a real humanitarian need. And I think the protection cluster system gives us a mechanism that we can work to provide the top cover we need for both the national authorities and the de facto government and the donors to be able to operate using, if you want, the good offices of the SRSG and the mandate that the UN has to be in Afghanistan, to provide that umbrella, that coverage, to allow humanitarian activities to take place, to be funded, initiatives like the cash transfer mechanism that the UN has put in place that will allow us to try and maintain support to the implementing partners so that they can get on with the day-to-day delivery of operations and to ensure that we are prioritizing these very limited resources into areas that have the highest need, and that there is no duplication of effort, and we are aiming to have the highest impact with the best outcome and the right output indicators to make sure that's all happening. It's going to require a lot of effort. We are going to drink a lot of tea, and we are going to spend a lot of time going around these things. But I think if we are open, we are transparent, we engage with the authorities who want us to be there. The Taliban have been very clear. They want mine action. The correspondence that we've seen coming out is very much talking about casualties. There's a large number of casualties, and they want help from the international community. But what they're struggling with is how they can request that assistance while they're not recognized. And I'm not advocating in any way that they should be recognized. I'm just saying we need to help them to help us to help the people of Afghanistan, who are the people who really need this assistance. And so, it is in itself a little bit of a political minefield. And but I think if we work together on this and we do drink an awful lot of tea, we will find a solution to this and be able to implement some good projects this year. And the final thing, again, is I think, to reiterate, the difference it would make to Afghanistan to have 20,000 Afghans employed in the sector in terms of income to families, liquidity into the system, and really starting to knock off a lot of these dangerous areas would be immeasurable. And we have an opportunity in the next 2 years to provide that employment and to make a difference if we could just mobilize the resources to employ those 20,000 people. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Paul and Lyuba. I think everybody is aware of the dire situation in Afghanistan, and to hear how mine action can have a positive contribution beyond simply clearing explosive hazards is really amazing. Amazing opportunity that I really hope that we can capitalize on. I think I was conscious of hearing the word maintain. So in that really turbulent political and social time for the Mine Action Programme to maintain its presence, and just hearing about the supreme importance of the national database. We know, knowledge is power, and certainly without an understanding of the extent of the hazard, we stand to lose an awful lot of ground. So I think that the team is doing really well, Paul and Lyuba, to try and maintain and build on what we can in that situation, and also encouraging, and certainly from when I was there, that the Taliban they have a very positive outlook to mine action, and we're grateful for that. So now I'd like to turn, last but not least, Callum, to Callum Peebles from the Halo Trust. So the Halo Trust is one of UNMAS's long-term implementing partners, and especially in Afghanistan. The time that I was there, I know many Halo colleagues, and really they make a huge impact on the Mine Action Programme in Afghanistan that, I just can't stress it enough. So Callum joined the Halo Trust way back in 2003. He's worked in mine clearance operations in Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Angola, Mozambique, and Afghanistan. One of the projects he managed there destroyed over 1,300 tons of ammunition in Herat. He's been the chief of staff for Halo. He's had the environmental lead for Halo. He has run their South Caucasus desk and is now head of the region for Central Asia, which covers Afghanistan. So we're very grateful to have you here, Callum. It'll be good to hear from you, and it looks like the first slide is a very snowy car park. But over to you, Callum. You have the floor.
Thanks, Abigail. Salam alaikum to everybody here. I appreciate the time, and I'm conscious that we're sort of a bit behind time. I've got a bit of a gamble here because unfortunately, in spite of the good first slide, I might be looking at the wrong presentation. So I'm gonna go with what I can. So hopefully you'll forgive me if it seems a little bit out of kilter. Halo obviously has got a long presence in Afghanistan. For those that don't know, we've been there since 1988, and we've been operational through each of those major regime changes. And obviously, we need to acknowledge our donors in that, and UNMAS, a sort of vital assistance in all of that to enable us to continue our work. This slide, incidentally, was taken in February of this year when I was out in Kabul and had the chance to visit Kandahar, and a colleague visited Maidan Wardak at the same time. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to sort of highlight something that Paul touched on before. On the left-hand side is our sort of operational map from before August. The red colours indicate Taliban control. The grey colours indicate government of Afghanistan control, and the pink areas were contested. The way we were operating was really through sort of challenging and time-consuming negotiations. On the right-hand side, the map is green, as you can see, and we have sort of broadly unfettered access across Afghanistan so long as we gather our letters of permission, which we are sort of extremely diligent in doing to enable our staff to operate safely. I just wanted to raise here that Halo managed to actually deploy 1,400 staff at the beginning of September. So a couple of weeks after the fall, we were able to actually deploy half of our capacity. We ended up deploying 3,000 staff in December. So we went up to a good number in December. Unfortunately, we're now back down to 2,200 because we simply aren't able to gather that funding. This is having to lay off 800 people is pretty depressing at a time when there's such an obvious requirement for mine action, at a time when IDPs are returning home into more rural areas, at a time when accidents are spiking across the whole country, and of course at a time when there's a greater demand for self-sufficiency in the rural environment. People need to, there's a well-advertised problem with food insecurity, and at a time when people need to be more self-sufficient, the idea that we have a lower capacity, clearing explosive hazards in places like rural environments, is mind-boggling. I'm going to gamble and go for the next slide and see what it shows up. Okay, so this is another demonstration of the security threats, but I'm going to pass on that and go to the next slide, please. So what did Halo do? What's Halo been doing? Well, we have, to follow the theme of this particular series of presentations, in terms of our rapid response, we've been responding to requests from the local community to come out and clear single items and to record areas where there are hazards. We've been conducting mine risk education, as has been described, and we've been responding to the request of other agencies in their efforts to deliver humanitarian aid. We've also been conducting extensive survey across the south, and we've been focusing that on areas where there's been fighting, where there have been accidents reported, and where there have been community requests. Let's go to the next slide, please. Back one. So what did all this look like? Unfortunately, a couple of my slides are missing here, but I'll tell a story about this particular one. In February, I was out in Kandahar in Panjwai district, where we were called out to see an IED which was positioned underneath a culvert, which you can see there. It's a pretty innocuous item. While we were looking at this, our Taliban police escort, who was standing with us, took a look under the culvert and said, "Oh, that's one of mine. I laid that," and then proceeded to explain and provide guidance on where else he'd laid IEDs. So it was a pretty remarkable situation and sort of somewhat unnerving. So The other sorts of responses we're conducting is in Gorak, in Kandahar, which is a village which hasn't been accessed for 15 years, or 20 years in fact, and which has seen some extremely heavy fighting. We've conducted survey and assessed that there is a significant amount of high priority IED contamination in that area. We were also at that time able to respond within about 48 hours to a community request to clear an IED from a local marketplace. And these sort of community requests, if you can just fix on that one, stay on that slide. These sorts of community requests are quite common, and we're responding to those. But I also wanted to draw attention to, for this crowd, to draw attention to the fact that we're also enabling the work of other organizations. And for example, in October, we were able to... Yeah, if somebody could mute, that would be brilliant. I've got a bit of feedback on the mic. If everybody could mute. Okay, I'm going to carry on. In October, Halo was asked by UNHCR to conduct clearance of a site or two sites, one in Tirinkot in Uruzgan and another in Zabul. We were conducting clearance in order to make space for 100 permanent shelters to be constructed for 640 people. This was requested by our colleagues at UNMAS and was a demonstration of that sort of coordination work which is desperately needed. And there are plenty of other cases like that for Halo. For example, we cleared a UN compound in Herat in September. In January, we assessed a suspect item in an ICRC compound in Kandahar, and we've been offering support to local NGOs like one called Madeira, who are working under a European community funding project to provide health support, and we were able to do some route clearance in order to allow them to gain access to another rural community in Tirinkot in Uruzgan. So during all of these activities, what we're finding is pretty staggering levels of IED contamination across the country, with villages like this one you can see in the picture in Hadira and Arghandab completely covered with IEDs. We're also finding that there are direct effects on schools. So Halo's recorded 7 schools that have been either surrounded by IEDs, or IEDs have been placed within the school compounds themselves. We've seen significant evidence of casualties, particularly to children, and Abigail made mention of a record of over 350 children since August that have been killed by explosive devices. Actually, to demonstrate the sort of the importance of communication, our records show at least 545 children have been killed in that same time period. So it really is a dreadful situation. And to gain, if you can go back one, please. Yeah, let's stay on that one, thanks. To give you a bit of context, Halo's survey in the months between January and March, so in 3 months, Halo's recorded new IED contamination that equates to an area that's 4 times the size of New York Central Park, 4 times. What that in operational terms means, it equates to about 6 years worth of work using Halo's current IED capacity. So at our current rates of clearance, the amount of land we've recorded in 3 months equates to 6 years worth of work, which is pretty desperate. In the months from the end of August, we've also been clearing IEDs, and by comparison, February of 2021 to February of 2022, Halo's increase in the number of IEDs cleared has gone up by over 1,000%. And that is in areas like Kandahar, Uruzgan, and Helmand. But we are finding new evidence all the time. We've increased our survey capacity as much as possible and fully expect to see more contamination. So to add a little bit of context, this picture here, if you can see the picture here, on the left-hand side is a school building. In fact, the right-hand side is a school building, but it's unoccupied. In the foreground, where the Dimanis are working, is a playground. While I was there in December, that school building on the left-hand side was occupied. We've been clearing that. We cleared it from December through to the end of February, and we removed 17 IEDs from that location. Next slide, please. if you imagine on the left-hand side of this picture is the school building and the picture that we took before, these children would exit the school building and did that while we were there. The only safe route they had to school, to and from school, was on that track you see behind them. All of the other area, you can see in the background on the right-hand side, one of our teams, all of that other area is contaminated by IEDs. So in this particular village, Hadira, which means cemetery, there was extensive fighting in the summer months of 2021. We know that the National Security Forces lost 1,000 people killed during this fighting in the summer months. And probably more crucially for this audience is that following August, we have records of over 30 IED accidents in this village, which killed or injured over 70 people. So it's pretty stark, and these children here are sort of a demonstration of the fact that life goes on, but it's not without risk. Next slide, please. This is another school that I visited then in February. We were called by the Department for Education in Kandahar. This is in Panjwai district in the southwest of Kandahar. Next slide, please. And sorry, you can see, you saw in the last slide, the fact is that school was entirely laced with IEDs as opposition forces withdrew. While I was standing outside the school, I met another group of children who were essentially saying that their teacher was working in the local bazaar but was ready to come back and teach as soon as the area was clear. The schools themselves, and if we go to the next slide, this was another one that I visited on that same day. You can see that this was used as a defensive position. The bullet holes you can see are pretty obvious in the walls. There's evidence of an RPG attack to the corner of one building in the inset picture in the left-hand side. These schools actually have the capacity to support 1,000 students each. We've, as I said, recorded 7 of them so far. We've cleared 3, but we just expect more of this, which is it's depressing. Next slide, please. Another example of this sort of thing is on a track in the same province in Panjwai. I walked up and down this road. In the space of 50 meters, there were 7 craters which had occurred. This, although it was an extremely dry and dusty day, in the background there's a lot of work going on in terms of grape harvesting for export. Next slide, please. One of the other things we're uncovering in places like Helmand is IED production sites. We are entering, as people are coming back to their homes, they're finding out that in certain circumstances their homes have been used as production facilities for IEDs. We've cleared a number of these, and it's a particularly sensitive subject, particularly as we are able to speak to the bomb makers themselves, who actually have been quite helpful in explaining their methodology of laying IEDs and how they distributed them against the targets. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've run out of slides, but I've got a few more things to say. In the context of the work that we're doing, the other thing that we're doing, as I mentioned, is risk education. Where we cannot get out to provinces quickly enough to conduct survey or clear items, there's an absolute requirement for risk education to local communities. In the correct slides, I had a picture of a team in central Nuristan with a session of risk education, which was being led by one of our female staff. And it's worth noting that because of recent contracts which have been introduced, actually, Halo Trust has got the highest number of women employed in Afghanistan that it's ever had. It's a paltry number, 48, but we still have, it's significant. And those women are able to operate under a mahram structure with a family member, a male family member who's escorting them. But it's a sign that things are possible in Afghanistan, and that's the sort of message that we do want to get out there. It's particularly important that we provide this sort of employment to women because I heard a recent statistic that there are 700,000 war widows, more than in any other country on the planet in Afghanistan. We need to find a way to help them. I can go on for a while, but I'll sum up, and try and answer the exam question, which is sort of why is this critical? I think we look at the basic humanitarian need. We have the extent of contamination is pretty staggering. Many communities are affected, and quite crucially, as people leave urban environments for rural environments because of the mass unemployment that Paul made reference to, the land is going to be used more, and there's going to be likely more accidents going on. I've spoken about IEDs, but only 2 months ago, 7 children were killed in one single accident as a result of UXOs. A popcorn seller was collecting scrap metal to supplement his income, and the item exploded and killed 7 children. In that same province, in Nangarhar, another 2 people died the following day, just to give you a sense of how sort of frequent this is. In Pehr, in another village I visited in February, a village I visited which has a population of 340 people, 15 of those people have been killed in the last 6 months. So of a population of 340, you can see the impact. So there's that basic humanitarian impact which we're looking at. There's also that enabling function, the sort of work that enables other humanitarian operators to conduct their work, which is absolutely crucial, and we can't underline it enough. We want to try and ensure that those organizations that are able to supply help to the Afghan people are able to do that in safety. We have that preventative aspect of recognizing that where there isn't funding, we do need to provide that risk education for people that simply are unfamiliar with the area that they've returned to. It's absolutely crucial. And then for the long term, it's critical. Paul's spoken about the need to increase the staff, the numbers of people in the Mine Action Programme for Afghanistan. He's right. The unemployment levels are dreadful. And to give you a sense of context, in Zabul, we're starting another contract, and we're trying to recruit for 93 people. For those 93 jobs, 1,800 applications were received. 1,800 applications for 93 jobs, which gives you some sense of things. And employment is one of those things which really is a no-brainer for assisting the Afghan people. You have mass unemployment because the funding into the country has been whipped away. You have support networks across Afghanistan which are completely destabilized. And so one of the really key and critical ways of providing assistance for people is to enable them to bring in an income and to act as a support system for their extended families. I think I'll close it off there, Abigail, and thank you very much. And just to reiterate my thanks to our donors and to UNMAS and everybody who assists. And obviously I want to recognize all of my other Afghan colleagues who conduct this brave work throughout the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Callum. I think that was just so sobering. The photographs that you showed really brought to life the challenge ahead. I mean, the very first one, to just see the change in access is phenomenal. And just to hear about, Hadira, just really sad statistics, and just thinking what you were saying about 3-month survey produces 6 years of work. I mean, that's a huge challenge in that country. I will say that I heard you say things are possible, which was probably the most cheerful thing you said. But I think we should just all hold on to that things are possible. We need the support, but there is a great opportunity that the Mine Action Programme can provide. So thank you, Callum. It's good to bring to the heart of New York the real situation there in Afghanistan. So I would like to thank everybody for listening. I do hope that there are some questions, or I think there is one question. Sorry, I'm just looking at my helper who can...
There's a question from Hannah Holloway. I wonder if she wants to unmute herself.
There is a question from Hannah Holloway. I wonder if you could unmute Hannah and then maybe ask the question directly. If you have your unmute button easy to hand. If you could also introduce yourself.
Sure, certainly. I apologize. There's a lot of background noise. I'm actually in
the UN in Geneva, so in a different, at the EWIP consultations at the moment. So my name is Hannah Holloway. I work with the Danish demining group, which is now called the Humanitarian Disarmament and Peacebuilding sector under DRC, Danish Refugee Council. I was quite curious to hear, of course, about some of the many challenges that Paul Heslop was mentioning regarding the sanctions, and especially the implications regarding the financial and liquidity situation. I understand, of course, from colleagues on the ground who are working in Afghanistan that DMAC are no longer or unable to obviously take on the coordination role since the pullout of foreign forces and the transition to a different government. I was wondering if there was a basis for supporting national entities through the Security Council Resolution 2615 that was passed in December 2021, which would allow for the resumption of engagement and support to national authorities, especially the Mine Action Authority in this situation. I understand it does contain a clause regarding payment of salaries for civil servants. Now, this isn't obviously the only issue. You mentioned quite a few regarding the coordination mechanisms in total. I was just wondering if there was a basis to be able to support these types of mechanisms through this resolution.
Thank you, Hannah, for the question. I will, of course, turn to Paul to answer that.
Yeah, Hannah, I mean, that mechanism would allow it to happen if a donor would like to give the funds to support DMAC or Andamar. And so, this is one of the discussions we've been having with DMAC is, are there member states that are more willing to recognize the de facto authorities, or more willing to provide funds that would go to the de facto authorities, or less stringent on how the funds that are given to us are spent. So the issue is not that the VTF for Voluntary Trust Fund for Mine Action that's administered by UNMAS cannot use funds in that way. It is the donors who are putting the funds into the VTF have put red lines in place that do not allow those funds to be spent on anything that's seen as substantive support to the de facto authorities. So it's not that it can't be done. The resolution allows it to be done. The SRSG and the RC have certainly advocated that to us. The de facto authorities have highlighted this to us, but he who pays the piper calls the tune. And if the donor in question is saying no, we are not in a position to take their funds and spend it in a way that they are saying no. So it's not that there isn't a mechanism for this. It is simply there are no dollars in the bank that have a green light from the donor who is providing those funds for it to be used to support the DMAC at this stage. Now, whether that will change, whether things will move on, we will see. But I've certainly, we've certainly discussed possibilities perhaps from some of the Gulf states or perhaps from some of the non-Western aligned states that they might be prepared to provide funds either directly to DMAC or through the VTF. Now, if it came through, or one of the other Afghan trust funds. Now, obviously, if it comes through a UN trust fund before it can be released, we would need to confirm that's okay. But for me, if a donor is out there and wants to write a check for $2 million to the DMAC to cover the coordination requirements, that would be a fantastic contribution. But it's not something that, at the moment, our current donors are prepared to countenance. I hope that answers the question. Over.
Thank you, Paul. I think that there are no further questions in the chat. Just looking at the people in the room, if there's anybody here who would like to ask anything. Yes, go ahead. Please introduce yourself.
I will. Hi, my name is Lee Woodyear, and I do communications for the United Nations Mine Action Service here in New York. For Callum, I just wanted to ask a question for the IEDs in schools. I know because I've worked with our Iraqi colleagues for many years, but the purpose is just destabilization, or is it because those are battlegrounds that you think you're finding so many? Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Lee. Yeah, I mean, it was a battleground. So schools have been used as defensive positions because they conveniently have compound walls, and they're often public buildings which can be sort of taken over for use. And so often they would be the single location where they would be fighting. In the examples that I gave, the schools were either occupied by government forces, then taken over by opposition forces, and then retaken by government forces, and IEDs were laid on retreat. Or, in the case of Hadira village, the school buildings themselves were sort of safe zones for fighters, but the surrounding area was laid down. So, for example, in that example, there was a ring of 50 IEDs that had been laid outside the grounds of the school as a military effort to reduce effect harm against government forces that were trying to take back Hadira village. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That question and your answer, Callum. I mean, while you were talking about schools being used, I was lamenting that the use of schools in conflict is forbidden under international humanitarian law. And lamenting the fact that IHL is not adhered to the letter at all. Okay, are there any? I think that's probably, there are no more questions. I'm very, very grateful that you all dialed in. I think there's almost 50 people online, which is great. I would like to thank the people that spoke from Iraq and also Afghanistan, for those that attended and those that care about mine action in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's good to celebrate this raise awareness during Mine Action Week. But the challenge, of course, is to keep that awareness throughout the year. I would just like to make mention of this 30 years of impact. This can be found on UNMAS's website, or probably on Google if you Google it. But 30 years of impact and evaluation of the Mine Action Programme of Afghanistan. This was carried out at the end of last year and really paints a very positive picture of what has been achieved and gives us encouragement and impetus to keep at it. And as Callum reminded us, things are possible. So with that, I will close. Thank everybody again for being here and wishing you all a very good and productive day ahead. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye.